Hello, and welcome to the Awakening series. My name is Kimberly Archuleta. This is a show where we bring brilliant minds together.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Mr. Winters. We are so honored to have you. I am such a big fan. I've watched hours, we'll just say hundreds of hours of film on what you've put out there. You are phenomenal. You are the Nikola Tesla of this day and age, and I'm just so thankful to have you on the show.
Your words are kind and your smile is gorgeous. So yes, please, let's have fun. All good.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, I think the audience would love to hear more.
After I did graduate school in psychophysiology and electrical engineering at University of Detroit, I was doing the physics of emotion. I was a polygraph operator designing the electric circuits. We saw how, college students, GSR, the galvanic skin reaction, it was immediate, the fastest switch I've ever seen when they saw Playboy magazine. So I knew that the physics of emotion was interesting. but then I went to the Gurdjieff School in West Virginia and studied the Gurdjieff sacred gymnastic and began to have intense bliss experiences, actually, a double Scorpio, a virgin at the time, and so I began to have intense Kundalini experience doing Gurdjieff sacred gymnastic, Claymont.org in Charlestown, West Virginia, and had bliss, Kundalini experiences. And I had been a systems analyst with IBM. I had studied physics of emotion with Marcel Vogel. I had a lot of background. I was the Forrest Gump of New Age physics.
Thank goodness you were, because you are here where you are today, and you've been doing so much amazing work with children too, which we're going to talk about today.
Yes. So we've been teaching, the short summary is we've been teaching the physics of consciousness, the physics of sacred geometry, the physics of spirituality, the physics of bliss for 30 years. And we have, half a dozen great biofeedback apps like flameinmind.com for teaching the science of bliss and the frequency signature. I invented the term heart coherence. Realheartcoherence.com is a good place to read about that. And now we have a plasma tech based on those same frequencies of bliss, the brainwave frequencies of bliss. We put that in plasma, and 30% of people have bliss experiences and experience sharpened vision, Therify.net, et cetera. So commercially, it has been a good way to prove it by building something that works. And we're a bit successful, I'm grateful to say. And now we're branching into many other fields, energy, propulsion. It's fun.
I love it. It is so fun. And it's so fun to hear all of your research and all of your findings. If you can give us some insight on the subject at hand, I would love for you to actually talk about it and give it the title, since it is your subject and you are the SME, the subject matter expert of this field.
So we're talking about the biofeedback, the science of bliss and awakening. What is it to awaken, to transcend, to be in the next dimension? Transformation. As an electrical engineer, how would you talk about awakening for humans? That is my background. And from the biofeedback perspective, from the biophysics perspective, we have a lifetime in that field. And much of that background is at flameinmind.com, where we teach the frequencies of bliss in brain waves, but also our recent professional film series on the biophysics of Kundalini, goldenmean.info/Kundalini. And that filmmaker is here today, arrived from Netherlands. We just made an amazing film about the real science of the history of the Grail and the story of Magdalene with the extraterrestrial origins context. And that's going to be released within minutes. It's really cool.
I can't wait to watch it, Mr. Winters. I'm so excited. That to me is like it's like a fairy tale. It's like almost not real, but it is. And you're researching it, and you're presenting your findings and everything behind what you've done to this day, bringing that forward within what you're doing and the videos you put out. So they are just, I can't wait for it. So thank you.
And it's a very simple science. Migdal, the amygdala of the brain, amygdala is the word, the migdal to tower, the tour migdal, around the Chateau, the Grail story. And literally the plasma of the amygdala becomes plasma projected. It's literally a tower when you have Kundalini or bliss. The Mag story, amygdal, which is the Dragon Queen Mag. And so the science of bliss mechanics becomes the science of the Grail story, which is the fractality of the blood, which implodes, called fusion in the blood. That article, fractalfield.com/fusion in the blood, which is the physics of recursive braiding and imploding of DNA during bliss, which is how the fire is ignited in your blood. Come on, baby, light my fire when you have bliss experience. So we just put that in the historical context of the Magdalene story very deeply, and we had great fun today with that graphics. And my Grail animation may be the most famous on the planet, goldenmean.info/Grail, and we animate that rotating spiral to the physics of what is the grail in terms of pure fractality in the blood during bliss. So yeah, that story, more and more people are turning on to what that story is. And that then does introduce what is the theme for this conversation, which is the real science of what ascension and awakening is. And that's where we want to go today, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So as far as the real science, all of your findings, all of your research, and of course, sacred geometry has definitely something to do with it. Can you give us some more insight on really what it looks like today for us, as far as that science goes, as far as just a basic human being not really knowing much about the Enlightenment process and the science behind it?
Well, from the Grail story we talked today, that John Trefine, who apparently is the actual son of Black Madonna, learned the Essene rites of bliss ignition, which include sun gazing, the ritual dance, the ritual mantra, and the many Essene rites, including ritual bathing in the sacred waters, all of which was designed simply to charge the aura. And that process, which if you did it at sunset at the right time, you feel that rush of bliss, which now we know the electrical engineering term for, which is longitudinal interferometry, which is the longitudinal wave coherence, which at the compression nodes named sacred sites. For example, the 5 caves named Mary Magdalene around Marie de la Mer and Saint-Remy in South France literally was a dragon cave array to create that ignition compression of the sacred site, facilitating the bliss experience, which is when you create that cocoon of charge around your body, basically a big aura, the Kafir Ba, that is a vehicle of plasma projection, literally Migdal's tower. And the ancient dragon cultures understood the physics of igniting blood. And so the practice of what it is to create bliss then becomes a science, which is, we say, the only real definition of culture is when you can teach your children how to have a bliss experience. Culture is not the color of your wine and your shoe polish. No. The culture is defined when you can teach your children how to have bliss, because that's how you get an immune system. That's how you get something you can take through death. That's how you can make phone calls to ancestors. Until then, you don't have culture. Actually, the L of Ur, which is dragon blood. So, go ahead. You had a question.
Could that be somewhat of a rite of passage for your child? I mean, I do have a 2.5-year-old, and I would love to teach him this bliss. So, I mean, I know that rite of passage for, boys, for example, back in the day, they'd go out in the woods and chop a tree or something. Every culture has a different rite of passage, but this could, if this goes, global, which it very well should, and it's taught in the schools all around the world. I mean, this could be a rite of passage to really perform your own aura and to enjoy that bliss at a young age, not when you're like my age. I think that would be amazing.
In many of the Aboriginal tribes, the young boys, the day they emerged as men, they went out into the wilderness, away from their mothers, into the club of their fathers. And then they would set up a small camp in the wilderness, and they would be taught to be by themselves for a night or two. And the key point was, did they have a lucid dream? So if they came back from that experience with a dream and could tell about that dream, the theme of that dream became their name and their function in the community. And now we know the physics. It's actually, Therify.net, our plasma, is a known trigger for lucid dreaming, which is the main predictor of whether you will take memory through death, longitudinal coherence. And we know the electric field that triggers lucid dreaming, which is the same physics of what creates a sacred site. And if you can lucid dream, it means your longitudinal coherence body has been born. So of course, if your child can have a lucid dream and talk about it, they have literally begun the process of ascension. That is a culture of bliss.
That was beautiful. Well stated. Thank you so much. Question for you. You are in the south of France, and you talked about the coherence. Is that why you're in the south of France? Like, why are you there?
Well, in high school, I studied French.
Oh, nice.
And then when we went to South France during high school, and we went to the University of Montpellier to study French, I, in fact, was only studying pretty girls and beer at the time. However, actually, my ancestors were French German, and my memory of the Grail history extends here. And I began to have lucid dreaming, actually, about a Cathar mountain near here, Bucharest, which is parallel to the mountain we live on, which is Canigou. And those lucid dreams actually pointed me to when the opportunity arose. I had been living in Netherlands, where we worked in the lab, making love visible in Hilversum, Netherlands. And then we had a small place in Germany. And then we had the opportunity to come and stay here. And we moved into this Canigou Sacred Mountain, which is the Dreaming Mountain. I give you an example. You can see the pictures of the 3D animation of the shadow of Canigou, the sacred mountain of Cathars that we live on, which is literally a pine cone. You animate that in 3D from Google Maps, you get a pine cone named Perpignan through the pine cone, the origin of the word Perpignan, which is where we live now. And that mountain was exactly the halfway conjugate point between the Tour Migdal of Girona, which taught Saunier of Rennes-le-Château how to build the Magdalen Tower, named Rennes-le-Château the center of the Grail mysteries. And the halfway point was the sacred Mount Canigou. And Patrice Chaplin, who wrote the book on the Kabbalah mysteries of how the Saunier learned those things, was here when my friend actually died in the lightning storm on Canigou. It's a big, long story. But that story is at goldenmean.info/twin towers, and you can see the animation. Point being is, this was called the Twin Towers in Lord of the Ring, located in Aragon, which is, Aragon is actually the name of the place where the plasma projection of the Grail mysteries becomes possible. And this is a metaphor for our next film in this series, which is called How the Holy Grail Came to America, the West. Starts with the book Holy Grail Across the Atlantic and Pandora's Box, and talks about the residue of the Grail bloodline. Actually, the last Philip XVII became Daniel Pesur, the wealth of the Americas, which was the dream to bring the Grail bloodline. The children of Jesus is a metaphor for those who can hold bliss in their blood. And that star map in America is the Eagle in Pennsylvania, and the place is named El Dorado, make a pentagram. I mean, it's a whole story of the Grail myth in the Americas. And that's the next film in the series we're making right now.
Oh man, I cannot wait to watch it. I am so excited about all of the things you're doing.
Let's inspire
Yes. This is phenomenal. So how can we help awaken both humanity and specifically youth with knowledge needed to heal and save humanity?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. I mean, as with things like the vaccine seemingly weakening the aura, and things like electrosmog and metal buildings in big city weakening the aura, and the design of food, loss of genetic diversity seemingly weakening the aura, fewer and fewer children then able to lucid dream. You know,
Absolutely.
The stress is on to find a way to teach the kids that, in fact, if you don't get a big aura, you're toast. Hello. And so it's time to teach the kids the value of what it is to build their aura, their cocoon, their, call it awakening or ascension. There's so many words for this physics. The ka from the body, it's called the rainbow light body. It's called the ascension body. There's many names for this. But now that we know the physics, it's a longitudinally coherent charge bubble that you can take with you when you die. It was so instructive when we measured the kids who were able to see without their eyes, and we were going to talk about this anyway. But so this is flameinmind.com, our brainwave software. We're teaching kids to see without their eyes, flameinmind.com/outer vision. And kids who can see without their eyes is well known and famous and practiced in dozens of countries. What we've done is measure the phenomena and teach the physics. So we've interviewed dozens of kids who their eyes are closed, they're blindfolded, and they go into a trance kind of bliss experience. And then they all report the same thing. They see a little tunnel open inside their head, and they look through that tunnel and they can see through it. It's literally a little vortex. It is a plasma tornado, which is the physics of what consciousness is. Absolutely. Because now we can know exactly, there's famous medical doctors who've traveled outside their body during near-death experience. So many medical doctors have documented taking their eyeballs outside their head during near-death experience. So no physicist can deny that you can take your eyeball outside your head. It's well known. They even know where you're looking from in the room when you're outside your body looking at the surgeons drilling a hole in your skull during your near-death experience. And by the way, you can't see from inside an aluminum box. Never. You can only see from a place where plasma can form a tornado, a vortex. And the center of that tornado is the eyeball, as evidenced by the kids who, when their brainwave harmonic, it's actually a cascade from alpha to gamma, about 8 hertz up to about 40 hertz. That cascade, when there's golden ratio and octave components in that cascade, what happens inside the child's head is they've grabbed a hold of the vortex tornado and squeezed it. And that compression phenomena brings that vortex to a point called an eyeball. And that is the physics of vision. It's the true physics and the only real physics of consciousness. You know, Bill Tiller measured focused human attention causes charge fields to compress. We are the first one to teach the physics of why focused attention is implosive, because that's the centripetal force. And that's how a Draco mind meld with an Orion Queen mod creates this huge, feels like a vice-like grip. The measurement of how powerful is your consciousness is literally how centripetal it is. It's obvious. That's what causes a seed to germinate. You can make a seed germinate by making that electric field. Theraphite.net is bought by now the lead biodynamic agriculture people, because we can make a seed grow the same way we can design a building which makes a seed or a child grow by making that centripetal. So that is the importance of teaching the science of consciousness and bliss. And to young people, it's teachable. It's fun. Anyway.
That was beautiful. No, that was really, really well stated. I loved it. Thank you. As far as two things, can you define centripetal and then also talk a little bit about golden ratio, which I love, but I don't know if a lot of our audience knows exactly what golden ratio is, but going off of centripetal, that would be great.
No, that's very appropriate, because you need to know what centripetal means or you can't understand anything, really. So in physics, what is true is you have either a centripetal, which is a centering force, or a centrifugal. It's literally implosion versus explosion. And sadly, it is my experience for studying physics for a lifetime, although I'm not a physicist, I'm an electrical engineer. But apparently, physics does not actually know the cause of any force that's centripetal. So, for example, how tornadoes get centripetal, or why gravity is centripetal. In other words, why objects fall to the ground. The reason your science teacher or any physicist on this planet, David Hawkins, Einstein, and NASA, cannot tell you why an object falls to the ground, sadly, and that leaves your children profoundly confused, is because they don't know the reason anything is centripetal. That is horrible. So when Victor Schauberger is watching his vortex, water vortex, about to make voltage from gravity, it spontaneously got colder, named negentropy, self-organization, and it began to get centripetal. And at that moment, it made voltage from gravity. Now, if you do that with a mercury vortex, you can make propulsion called a Hanabu. And the reason America lost to the Nazis is they were just too stupid to know how a vortex makes gravity. It's horrible. That is the ET story of the secret space program. So you got to start by teaching your kids how a vortex makes gravity. And by the way, that's how you make vision.
Beautiful.
So to know what being centripetal is essential. And the golden ratio fits that perfectly, because when the geometry of the vortex, visualize a nest of pentagram stars within stars, a top-down view of a nest of dodecahedron called the star mother kit, goldenmean.info / kit, that dodeca within dodeca equals infinite stellation, which is the top-down view of DNA and every living protein, also Earth grid, zodiac, and the galaxy. Actually, physics has proven the geometry of masses arranged in the known universe is dodecahedral. There was also Steiner's foundation stone. It's all stellations based on golden ratio, because that optimizes self-similarity, therefore embedding, therefore is the essence of the generalized principle of what fractality is. Self-similarity is the essence of fractality. And therefore, as any mathematician can tell you, it is the perfection of infinite compression. And that's why Einstein didn't figure out why an object falls to the ground, because he didn't know what a fractal was. But although he already said that if you understood infinite compression, you'd understand gravity, which he did not, because he didn't know what a fractal was. And golden ratio is the essence of the principle of fractality, self-similarity, sometimes called perfected embedding. Now, the sexy term in physics today is perfected entanglement. And which is perfected embedding, it's called conjugation of phases, which is what golden ratio does. And that is, any physicist can tell you, is the beginning of the physics of action at a distance. They call it entanglement, but they should call it phase conjugate perfected embedding. And that builds those wormholes which act from the compression centers of the longitudinal nodes and the sacred sites where telepathy is possible and ancestor phone calls are possible. So it's all related to the origin of centripetal force and the physics of golden ratio, perfected fractality. And the sort of physics and math behind all of that is at fractalfield.com/vacuum energy, which is why it's the physics of zero-point energy as well.
That was perfect and very quickly stated, but it was super easy to get. Thank you. Just one last definition, I guess, with that. If you can just simply define fractal.
Yeah, well, Mandelbrot invented the word fraction, a fractal of the all, as it were. A fraction of the all is a fractal. And Mandelbrot means almond bread, and the shape is like a bread made of almonds. It's a recursive embedded almond. But what many people don't know, if you just simply make a picture of the Mandelbrot fractal, it's golden ratio to golden ratio to golden ratio. I say golden ratio to the fourth power. So it is. So there's many implications there, that fractality. In pure physics, the best definition of fractal is not just perfected self-similarity, but perfected compression. Understanding perfected.
In addition, yeah.
Yes, it is the only real climax definition of fractality is infinite compressibility. So from a mathematics perspective, every scientist will tell you that fractality is the only definition of perfected compression. But no electrical engineer on this planet until me discovered that what is a fractal electric field, which is the answer to phase conjugation and the answer to implosion and the answer to, I say, that the solution to perfected compression is the specific solution to the evolution of computers, the evolution of consciousness, the evolution of zero-point energy, the evolution of alchemy, the evolution of how to make gravity, the evolution of urban design. If you solve the problem of perfect compression, you have the solution to almost every single problem facing physics today. Urban design, what is it? It's a solution to compression. Because if the magnetic map of your city looks like a fractal, hello, people have bliss. It's called Prague. People are attracted because it's fractal.
Actually, interesting that you said that. Everybody's asked, because I've traveled Europe quite a few times. Everybody asks, what's your favorite? And of course I say Spain because my family's from there, but really in all actuality, I say Prague. I was very drawn to Prague. And when I was there, I just loved it. And it was the best day of my life, I think, being there. I mean, I was there for a couple of days, but one of the days was the best. And I was like, this is literally one of the best days of my life. I loved Prague.
The original magnetic map of Prague is literally a rose. And it's where John Dee did his alchemy for a reason. And I had lucid dreaming there, which is very significant, actually. But the reason, if you want to attract tourists and money, rearrange the magnetic map of your house and your city to look like a rose, and man, you got it. Because it becomes centripetal, megatropic, self-organizing, the whole thing. It's the rosy cross.
Has anybody hired you to kind of help them map out their home?
Actually, many. I'm consulting with biologic architects in many countries right now, and we're having a whole lot of fun. And by the way, that whole story is at goldenmean.info/architecture, and the Prague story is at goldenmean.info/bohemia. So you can see the pictures.
That's perfect. That's beautiful. As far as getting into, teaching our youth, I think it's so important getting them into, this type of thought process and understanding it at a young age, as early as possible, really. And I saw your videos with the kids with that huge mask on, not even a mask. It was like the glasses were suction cupped to their face. They were black, and other people put them on and no one could see anything. And they were able to line up every single color properly. They were able to read a book from somebody holding it over there, and they were able to read the book everything was just so phenomenal. I'm sorry, I'm closing my eyes, but I'm like trying to just imagine being able to read a book with my eyes closed, being able to put together a very hard puzzle, not knowing what the actual picture is of the puzzle. How the heck? That was so amazing. So as far as your school for kids. If you could tell us a little bit more about it and the cool name. I love the name and the concept behind it.
Yeah, JediSchool.science, and that's part of the flameinmind.com/outer vision cosmic school for kids. Jedi meaning plasma projector, and which is the Jedi Tower from Egypt was a plasma projector. And it's true, when they originally taught kids, even in Russia, the original World Without Blindness project in St. Petersburg, the first step for the kids was imagine yourself in beautiful nature. Close your eyes and imagine beautiful nature. Now, what happens when you do that effectively? It's not unlike if the child imagines a rose well with their eyes closed, you can tell they're doing it well because the room fills with the smell of roses. And the Steiner people actually do that, and we teach the physics of how that works. The flowering brain, the infrared component of bliss, which is the physics of olfaction. So we know why the room fills with the smell of roses when children have accurately enough visualized the rose. So when you visualize yourself in beautiful nature, your body flips an electric switch and you get fractal, which is to say you start to implode, because your body says, oh, now I can get centripetal, I can implode my environment. The same reason why you can sustain a bliss experience in nature. Whereas if you're in a metal city in electrosmog with bad air, unfortunately, bliss process means you're going to implode poison around you. So bliss is not going to be sustainable. So it's literally your environment that feeds the sustainability of bliss. And that's true of those kids, because then when they start to get centripetal, that electrical implosion force in their brainwaves, as we explained, allows them to compress the throat of that plasma vortex tornado, which comes to a point, literally how a shaman steers a tornado, because the center of the plasma cone literally has an eyeball. It's the phase conjugate physics of what perception is, and we have more detail on the biophysics, fractalfield.com/conjugate perception. But the point is, the kids started to get into the necessary trance bliss state by imagining nature.
I love that. It's so beautiful. I've heard you talk about spiritual hygiene. Can you explain, I guess, what that is in relationship to Jedi training?
Yeah, well, when Luke Skywalker went to train to be a Jedi, he didn't go to a big city with technology. No, he went deep, deep, deep into nature. And then you could say, may the force be with you. And the same reason why the orbs won't appear in metal buildings. No, if you want to photograph orbs, you go to nature. Why? It's because the high dielectric constant makes plasma distribution permissive. Okay, so actually, the physics is that biologic materials, the only real useful for architecture, have high dielectric constant because every molecule there joined the club called Get Fractal or Get Dead, called life. And so you use living fabric and living wood and living stone to make biological architecture. The reason is that increased fractality, named in physics high dielectric constant, enables charge distribution efficiency, the definition of dielectric constant, efficient capacitance. And then your child's aura can unpack permissively. So if you're in an aluminum box, forget it. Or if you're in living material, then your aura can unpack and unfold and feel the implosion of bliss, which is literally the definition of consciousness, which is the increasing size of that plasma donut. So spiritual hygiene, astral hygiene, is literally the physics of learning that every single activity you do, where you choose to go to school, where you choose to shop, which broccoli you eat, and who you choose to kiss, actually, ultimately, the decision is quite simple. Is this going to make my aura bigger or smaller? It's not a complicated question. It's a simple question. Like, is this next trip I'm planning on that aluminum tube with high bias voltage called an airplane that's going to practically destroy my aura? Is this trip going to make my aura bigger or smaller? It's a very simple question. And if you ask, the more often you ask that question, the more often you have spiritual hygiene. And the thing is, that's measurable.
I feel like almost going back just a couple hundred years ago with indigenous, folks here in even the Americas and the dreams. So, for example, I am Cherokee Indian, a big portion Cherokee Indian. I don't know much about that side of my family, but the fact that they lived in tents in nature on Earth, I mean, and they continue to always talk about their dreams and lucid dreaming and such. And I can see now, with all of the insight you've given us thus far, that this is how that happened. Whereas now living in a big apartment with all of the wires and Wi-Fi, and from every single person having their own Wi-Fi and connection from cable to satellite to whatever it may be, how that noise interrupts your bliss, which is your aura, which is your direct connection to like your own consciousness. Is that, can we say something like that?
Yeah, the magnetic map. In fact, indigenous people who walked for 100 generations on the same magnetic lines, their DNA became so fractal to the magnetic map of the land that they could regularly steer tornadoes. This is Aboriginal songline physics. It's interesting that when we were living in the Cherokee Sacred Burial Ground, our Circle of Life community in Waynesville, North Carolina, and that's when I discovered I had clairaudience after my Kundalini, because I could hear the Cherokee ancestors actually weeping from the beginning of the Trail of Tears. But then later, when I taught at Dahani Wahu's Cherokee Shaman School, Sunray Meditation Community in Vermont, and we showed Dahani, who was the Cherokee grandmother and good friend, the Ophanian alphabet, later used to make the movie Stargate, and the real meaning of the Return of the Bird Tribe. That Ophanian alphabet, plasma shadows, John D. and Kelly saw, which is angel physics, because it's the hypercube physics of how you make the plasma, named an angel body. And all the plasma universe physicists these days believe in angels. It's not a problem. But we showed her that ancient alphabet of the angels we used to make when we started the hypercube physics and implosion. She said, "Oh, that's the alphabet of the ancient star elders of the Cherokee called Adawi." Actually, and you can see those pictures and that conversation at goldenmean.info/Cherokee, actually.
I haven't seen it, and I will definitely go and visit that.
So you have good DNA there, dear. Good work.
Thank you. Yeah, almost 40%, just shy of 40%. So I've been told.
Oh,
so it's pretty much definitely almost half. Some quick question: what are the practical applications, I guess, used by Jedi throughout their life, like from teaching them as a young Jedi through their adult life?
You know what "May the Force be with you" really means? It means the universally circulating plasma, which is the unified field, is self-aware. However, there are physics limitations to that. Namely, you probably are not going to have much of the force be with you if you're in a metal building with electrosmog, because there's not much force circulating there. So if you want to gather your forces to have the force be with you, you need first to learn where the force is. And I may say that when the famous Kozyrev put the Kozyrev mirrors, they got military qualities telepathy every time, talk about calling the force. They made a measurement in nanoteslas of the cross of the Earth magnetic line first, which is also where Korotkov followed the Kogi to find where they made phone calls to ancestors and measured the fractality of the air. So step one for a Jedi is to understand there are places where the force can be with you and places where it's not going to be with you. And even Castaneda talked well about the place of power in a room. Every room has a place of power. What he meant was the place where the capacitance is centripetal enough to feed your aura. So this is where you gather your forces. So step one, recognize the power of place to let the force be with you. Of course, two is recognize the power of diet. You're going to need live food and happy DNA. The ancient Hopi blue corn, you could call the wind every time. We know the physics. But today's corn causes mucus because that DNA is angry for monoculture, which is like kids in jail for 100 generations. Monoculture is bad news. So genetic diversity is the key to your diet, as live food forces. The other thing about "May the Force be with you," we could say, just try to answer your question briefly, is the quality of your thought. So effectively, look, here is a collective plasma domain. It's a fractal field called the ancestral grid or sacred space. It's a circulating plasma field, and there are nodes in its sacred spaces. And this is the physics of collective unconscious, ancestor memory, Akashic records. It's the only physics. It's the only physics of action at a distance. And that array has gathered a library of survival memory over 1 billion years, DNA collective unconscious. It's DNA radio physics, absolutely. And that radio that exists in that intelligent, self-aware library of survival information is going to flow to those who think a shareable thought. Very simple. So every time you feel something intensely, your hair stands up, as his mind is right now, absolutely. You think a shareable thought, and then the plasma, all the plasma around, even the mountain over there, that plasma comes to me if I think a shareable thought. I'm serving the collective survival called the Eureka principle, and I get a little bit of bliss. So if you learn to think shareable thoughts continuously, you could call it thinking pure principle. So it means that every night when you go to bed, if you can play your day backwards and not interrupt the movie, it means you've processed the emotion. It's been compressed well. That means you're ready to die or ready to have bliss. It's the same physics. It's a compression event. Successful death is a black hole, and to prepare for it is the same physics of preparing for bliss. You need to become compressible. And so when you think pure principle, so every time you have anger or you become angry at something, you create a wave which literally cannot be distributed well. So you need to distill that anger to what was the pure principle behind it that serves everyone. And suddenly that's, again, a shareable wave. And then you're ready for bliss and death and to be a Jedi.
I had an experience, and maybe you can tell me about this. I had a friend who had an NDE experience, and he came back with some abilities. He didn't know what to do with them. There were quite a few, actually, and he was dead for a while. So when he came back with these abilities, he actually went to a psychic institute, 2 different ones in Washington. And so now he was able to harness and do great things with his abilities. So he gave me a clearing. His name is Kadam. He gave me a clearing from Washington. I'm here in Colorado. And this clearing, he texted me saying, I'm going to do this clearing. Are you calm? Are you ready? Yes, I am. It's in the evening. Just came back from the mountains, had a wonderful day. Great. I've never had anything like this happen. I've never experienced anything like this, or even had a clearing, an energy clearing. So didn't know what to expect. Expected nothing really, to be honest with you. You're in Washington. I'm here. I'll probably go to sleep nicely. How about that? What happened was about an hour after he said he finished, within that hour, my energy throughout my body was so racing so much. He said he brought energy because I'm Native American, energy from the earth, and connected it with my energy after the clearing, and connected it with my cosmic energy. And I think at that point is when I had this crazy energy. And I literally have the Mac Daddy of all Macs, because what I do for work, I own an instructional design firm. So we do a lot of design, and this Mac has to be amazing. Well, I was reading this email, and I guess I was supercharged because I was just like listening to your videos. I'm just so enamored and like, oh my goodness, it's so amazing. And life is so cool. Wow. It's like a fairy tale, but then better because it's real life. And so I was reading this woman's email, and I was ready to email her back, reply. And guess what? My computer short circuited, basically. Like it went, and I knew I had, because I could feel the energy and I could feel it getting, I don't know how to explain it. It was just more and more and more. And so and then all of a sudden I had this hearing. I could hear things outside. And I was like,
the audience.
I literally was like, I didn't understand. I didn't understand. I was like, are the windows open? Are the windows open? So I went to all the windows. They were completely closed. I couldn't understand it. So I listened to a YouTube video with my earphones. Too loud. Had to put them away. Had to put my phone away and just lay there. And I remember
that experience. Yeah.
The grounding. I said, I better ground myself. So I visualized the cord from my root chakra going down to, Earth's core. And just like, but it was so much energy that I couldn't ground it quickly. So eventually I fell asleep. And the next day I was like, whoa, that happened. Like, I can't believe that clearing, that energy clearing, just all this burst of energy. And I basically almost so short circuited my beautiful Mac. Like, whoa.
Great
So what are your thoughts on that? That just happened on Monday.
That's a great story. It's
or
wonderful.
Sunday, sorry.
You know, if you're having a lecture in front of physicists, before you start, you should always find out which ones have had a bliss experience, because those are the ones you can talk to. So it's wonderful that you're articulate about your bliss. It's excellent. And that the experience of clairaudience that you felt hearing at a distance is actually the physics of identifying with a larger array. So think of an array of like fractal nodes, and as you become still in the center of that array, it's all imploding in you. So eventually the radius of your hearing, and that's one of my direct experiences with Kundalini, was hyper to acute hearing, absolutely hyper acute hearing in clairaudience. So I totally identify with your experience. And, you know, we're doing regularly this remote healing physics quite successfully with Therify.net plasma, and we teach the physics of how remote healing happens. We're very successful. Use a witness, a picture, etc. But
yes,
doing it at sunrise, sunset works better because doing it a magnetic line cross, sender and receiver, works better because we know exactly the physics of this remote healing that your friend did for you, which is a beautiful story. So you had a bit of a Kundalini experience for sure. And coming to understand that more deeply is very useful because you identify with a larger field. And your ancestors came rushing right over because they saw a little seed of immortality is being born there. And let's jump into that vortex because that is the potential for immortality. It's a beautiful story. You should save that story with pictures for your grandchildren. Absolutely. Good one, dear.
Thank you. Oh, good. Okay. I'm so happy I got to share it with you. I really haven't told many people. I was like, I don't know if many people would understand. And I'm so glad you do. And we're able to really get into
and really see if your ancestors' memory, because the yearning at the moment of the death of your ancestors is the wind in your sails. So I'm sure they were there for that moment and they had a message about life purpose and, you know, the yearning of ancestors. All of that converges at moments like that. It's a beautiful story.
Thank you so much. I had one other story like that where liquid gold was coming through the top of my head. And when I was in a very thankful place, knowing I was going to go see my parents, I was in Florida living there for some time and they didn't want to visit me very often any longer. Tampa's not that fun as far as going there, you know, 3 times a year. They're like, I'm not going to do it. So I hadn't seen them for a while and I was going to go back home and visit them. I was just like so excited. And I was reading some amazing book, Celestine Prophecy, actually. And it just made me supercharged again. There you go. The supercharged. And so I just kind of lightly fell asleep, sort of. I wasn't completely asleep, but all of a sudden I felt all this liquid gold rush on top of my head and through my body. And I thought I died. I was like, I'm dead. Oh no, I'm dead. But I was like,
and
wow,
it is
this
liquid
is amazing.
Gold. Liquid gold.
It was amazing.
What it is. And if you study the physics of what liquid gold is in alchemy, that's what that plasma does. It's a perfect metaphor. It's, you know, a fractal self-similarity, electron shell valence, charge implosion. It's liquid gold. And it's the physics of monoatomic gold and the physics.
I'm telling you, that's what it truly felt like. And that's what I got right away, liquid gold coming through me and I'm dead. Well, I obviously didn't die and I eventually fell asleep. And
it's like that.
It is. And I eventually washed my hands a couple of times, like throughout the weeks, because a girlfriend in India said, oh, you're going to probably feel it a little bit more, you know, and it did. I did wash my hands and I felt it. I was like, whoa, just like, you know, I don't know if it was the water charging me or what it was.
Because the water is very permissive to that longitudinal array. In fact, the best would be to jump into a mountain river. That would be primo for that sort of thing.
That would be amazing.
And then you inhabit the mountain. You see visions of the whole mountain. You know, it's perfect.
And talk about bliss, Dan. So that was my experience because it felt so good. And that's why I thought I died. Like, this is death. But it was the best feeling I've ever felt in my entire life. Still to this day, I could still like remember it. So my thought process on that is, or maybe you can give me some insight on it. Like, that's when it imploded. Is that my implosion?
Yes.
Being that thankful with the supercharge of the book and just knowing how great it was. And I had my day. I went through my day. I really did. And then knowing I'm going to see my parents in just a few days and just the most thankful, amazing moment and everything happening at one time. Is that Kundalini experience as well?
Perfect compression is what it is. And for example, when it's been proven now that perfect death experience is profoundly blissful, necessarily and appropriately, exactly like perfect birth experience. It's the same compression event, actually. So when medical surgeons have now documented that death visions are contagious, And that the sequence of visions you see during death, the Heinrich flu variform constants, are plasma tunnel,
Yes.
lattice tunnel cobweb spiral. And now we actually know the low frequency infrasound you hear during perfect death, which is when our friend Daniel Schreiber came back from death and told us the story. He heard the sound, and it's the same infrasound that pyramids make, by the way. And so perfect death and perfect bliss are about plasma implosion, because that's the communion, which is the communion of saints with that ancestral memory, that collective unconscious. So if you can do bliss well, then you're going to do death very well. And the bliss is going to accelerate your DNA, that implosion, so you're going to be able to dowse better. You're going to be able to talk to water veins. You're going to be able to feel the magnetic lines. You're going to be able to talk to ancestors, either clairvoyance or clairaudience. All things these things evolve when your aura gets coherent with respect to that bigger field. The more you can support bliss experience. Probably to keep doing it, you might need to move to nature.
I agree with you. And I'm in the somewhat of the city here in Denver, and there's so much smog, much more than when I came from Florida, I would visit. But now I'm living here after 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And I had come from the mountains just this weekend, and the smog is even gotten much bigger, pushed out closer to like the foothills. And I was like, oh, driving down, oh, that's not good. So I appreciate you saying that. That's truth.
For the long term, we need to move. I lived in St. Mary's Glacier after I moved from Boulder to Denver when we started Transicom, what became Gaia TV. I set up there with Yurka, and was living in St. Mary's Glacier in the mountains. And that's actually where I met Alex Collier and Drownings in Boulder. So I remember.
Wow. I went to school in Boulder. That's right. You just have such an amazing story, such an amazing journey. What next for you? What else do you want to do? Like, I guess within the next 5 years, within the next 10 years, like, what would you like to see? What would you like to do?
Well, I found that it works so good to teach a new physics principle by building something that does it and sell it. And then suddenly every university and government on the planet wants to know. So we built heart coherence and it worked. And now everybody wants to know because we can sell it. We built healing plasma therify.net so we could sell it. We built implosion, theimploder.com, we sold it. So you build it and they will come, Well, we are now building carbon nano, and then you can filter radon out of water. You rotate the conjugator, you produce propulsion and energy directly. It is the key to vacuum energy if you can make carbon pure enough. If you know the frequency signature, which makes carbon grow, which is the same frequency signature that makes children grow, which is why 60 hertz prevents children and carbon from growing, and 50 hertz enables it, because 50 is the exact golden ratio of Planck. So we are going to build energy and carbon, and going to teach the physics of zero-point energy as we teach the physics of the cause of gravity is the same fractality. So we're building the technology. We have teams around the planet doing that. Both the Energine team, we have a thermal battery called a molten nickel red sun battery. You can drive a truck for a month on a suitcase.
Wow.
And we can actually take that same catalyst, which is fractal hydrolysis. We know the frequency signature Kanzi is used to hydrolyze water to make hydrogen, literally free energy. We know that frequency signature is my equation. So the perfected hydrolysis. And you can take that catalyst on the beach where the red tide has just made the cancer rate increase by a factor of 10. And it's proven in India, the red tide.
And in Clearwater, Florida. I was just there. They still have red tide. I left right during it.
You can read that whole story. You can smell
it from a mile, 2 miles away. It's terrible.
We have the solution, fractalfield.com/red tide solution. And it's quite simple. There is a catalyst that'll turn that poisonous algae that happened because of the Dinsar. There's a catalyst that'll turn that into hydrogen. So not only do you eliminate the algae that just killed almost every beach in Mexico dead, but you turn it into energy. That's just the beginning of our energy technology. So we're taking all this fractal field physics and we're turning it into technologies that heal. So not only is it the school, but it's revolutionary technology, all based on negentropy, the physics of the origin of self-organization, called The Origin of Negentropy, which is the title of my book, fractalfield.com/online book. So we're having a lot of fun at the moment, I have to say.
What would you suggest as far as like a 2-year-old child, 2.5-year-old, to kind of get in the midst of becoming a Jedi?
Well, you know, a child needs a safe enough space to follow their own bliss, actually. So it's the real principle behind Montessori school is you assemble around the kid, hopefully in nature, actually a school of nature. You assemble around them all of the tools needed for learning, and then you step back and let the kid decide what they're interested in. And that's the only way, actually, the child finds their own interest and then pursues it with passion. And then the child grows up finding its sole purpose, actually. So if the child is in a safe space enough to actually find their own interest and follow it, but that means you have to provide the ingredients for a very healthy aura for that child. So the child's going to be nature and healthy food and access to quiet and away from electrosmog. And the child will then find their own dream and pursue their own interests. So the Montessori school, you just surround the child with all the tools for learning, and then you step back. And the child is like a flower, and their aura is like a flower unpacking. And you know, when that flower unpacks, the child learns to visualize. You know how they learn to visualize a rose? They draw the rose more and more clearly. And each time they draw the rose, they're visualizing it inside more clearly. It's called I-Mod, as in amygdala. Imagine, I-Mod. And the problem is the child loses the muscles to make an inner picture inside their head if they spend too much time in front of a computer screen when they're too young. They lose the inner muscle to imagine. Imagine that. It's a tragedy.
It is. Absolutely. And I'm very thankful that my son he went to Montessori school for some time. Now he's staying with family, but he'll be going to Montessori just next month. So now that we've moved back, and it's a lovely theory. It's a lovely concept. And the Waldorf school too. I love that because they're really in nature. Like here in Boulder, they have a Waldorf school in Boulder, and they're outside, like even in the snow.
Yeah, Boulder's pretty cosmic. You gotta love Boulder.
Right. Okay. So as far as maybe to wrap up this wonderful session, are there any references? Well, two questions possibly. Are there any references you would like to share with our audience to help them further awaken, whether it be books or people?
Well, you know, we tried to assemble a pretty powerful index to all these references at fractalfield.com, the index on top, or goldenmean.info. And there's a library and a book there. So we believe. And our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Dan Winter Fractal Field, over 1 million views. You have 200 to 300 films ongoing. And so, you know, we have a pretty good library cooking. There's lots of beautiful references. And the more recent films on the ET history is all there. So that's a good start. We actually by the way, there's a bibliography and glossary there as well. I'll send some links to those.
Absolutely. And I'll have all the links up for everybody and below for everyone as well.
I think it's goldenmean.info/glossary. We have a glossary.
Okay. Oh, that's so helpful. Truly. Click, click, click. There's a link. There's that link. There's that link. That's so helpful. Dan, is there anything else you'd like to tell our audience? The fact that they're just, starting their awakening, any suggestions? Also maybe giving them, some love, because it is kind of hard once you awaken, in a sense. Things are different. You look at things differently. So.
Yeah, as soon as you find the ability to enjoy quiet, and you notice a little crackling inside, something's growing inside. We call it the Christed one, if you like, because the physics of crystallization, Christos. So crystallizing inside is this small electric field, which if it grows, will make you immortal. Will take memory through death and create your immune system harmonic inclusive. So that little inner electric body needs to be nourished. And that is a matter of beginning to enjoy the stillness and the quiet, which is kind of the opposite of Western culture. And most of Western culture is about doing things that destroy your aura. So learn to do things that build the aura. That's a fundamental compelling.
That's beautiful. That's well said. But yes, thank you for being a part of the Awakening series. We do appreciate all of your time and all of your research and all of your work. You're amazing.
And maybe the ending is the Sufi story. I am here because of you, and you are here because of me.
I love that. Thank you so much, Dan. It was beautiful. Thank you too. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.